Hey art nerds, today we are taking a look at the Stonehenge Aqua Black. I know a few other channels here on YouTube have already looked at this, so what I wanted for today's review is I wanted to do a kitchen sink review, which means I'm going to throw everything I have that I think would work well on this paper at this paper to give you guys a good idea of what media will and will not work on this black cotton rag watercolor paper. I have already reviewed the Stonehenge Aqua Coldpress and the Stonehenge Aqua Hotpress, and I have tutorial / field test videos on that if you guys are interested in checking out. I really like both of those paper. I think Stonehenge makes good paper, and I used to use Stonehenge way back when I was in undergrad for my printmaking needs, so I think it is a quality paper, and I have a good feeling about this black watercolor paper. Now, Van Gogh also makes a black watercolor paper, and I believe Holbein does as well, and I've talked about the Canson Colorline black drawing paper here on this channel, as well as Strathmore's black mixed media paper. You guys can check out my Strathmore Black Mixed Media and Polychromos tutorial down in the description below. So, what makes a good black watercolor paper? A good black paper isn't just dyed. The dye might come out if you add wet media. It often utilizes black wool, like black printmaking paper, and that's why black printmaking paper tends to be more expensive than fawn or white or tan papers. So, this is a 100% cotton watercolor paper. There are 15 sheets in the pad. It is 140 pound weight, and it's pad bound rather than block bound like the hot and the cold press. The packaging says it is suitable for watercolor, gouache, metallics, and acrylics, and it has the same surface texture as the cold press. So what I'm looking for in today's review is a black dye that doesn't reactivate or black wool. Now, the reactivation is a problem with the Canson Colorline black paper. I'm looking for opaque color that would really stand out on this paper, and I want a paper that can take a variety of media, something that's going to be really inspiring. So for today's review, here's just a selection of what I want to use on this paper. I'm going to look at Albrecht Durer Watercolor pencils. We're going to look at the Van Gogh watercolors because those are a little bit chalky and opaque. I have several beautiful Pastel Holbein watercolors that I want to try on this black paper. I have the Daniel Smith half pan set since these colors seem to be a bit opaque. I have the Lucas Studio watercolors. These are very opaque student grade watercolors. I want to see how they handle on this black paper. I have the Prima Marketing Pastel Dreams watercolors. I have the Moz Art Como Rebi set, and by the way, most of the products that are coming up in today's review are products that I've reviewed on this channel. So if you guys are interested in a full review for any of these, search in the little search bar and it should tell you what you need to know. We have the Carandache Fan Color. It claims to be both tempera and gouache depending on where you look. We have some of the Fine Tech Metallics as well as some of the Alvin Fine Tech pearlescent colors, and I'm not going to swatch all of those. I just have several sets. We have some Polychromos color pencils. We have some FW acrylic inks, and I went for inks that are going to be more opaque on this paper as well as a fluorescent. I was interested to see how a fluorescent would look on this paper. We have some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, although I think I never got around to that. Some Posca markers. Some gel pens, and it's mostly Sakura jelly rolls in there, but there are a few other things as well. And you guys will be able to find in the description below a transcript of today's review as well as a list of the materials. Some handmade watercolors, Molly Marbles, Hydrocolor, and Jasper Stardust. So, we're looking at Posca gel pens, FW acrylic ink, Fine Tech metallic and pearlescent, Carandache fan color, Moz Art pearlescent, Van Gogh watercolors, Lucas Studio watercolors, Holbein pastel watercolors, Pastel Dreams, Select Core watercolor, Hydrocolor, Jasper Stardust, Molly Marbles, Faber-Castell Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils, Daniel Smith half pans, and Polychromos. And just a reminder, kitchen sink testing like this requires a lot of resources, and none of these resources were sent to me by any of the companies who I'm reviewing for. Everything was done out of my pocket. This also consumes a lot of goods, so if you enjoy what I do, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/nettosoup. This channel sees no outside sponsorship, save from my wonderful patrons, so your help and support are crucial for me continuing this channel. So we're going to break this review up into sections. We're going to do dry things, watercolor pencils, color pencils, Posca and gel pens, wet, gouache, opaque watercolor, wet, metallic watercolor, Albrecht. So right now we are swatching dry the Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils. And dry, I find the colors are rich, saturated, and stand up well on this paper. The paper texture holds onto the pencil pigment well. Watercolor pencils are really easy to use on this paper. Everything is so buttery. I also want to point out that I had some tearing difficulties when removing sheets from this pad. This black watercolor paper is a little bit softer. Maybe it doesn't have as much sizing as their cold watercolor paper. In general, though, I think it is a good watercolor paper. I just want you guys to be really careful when you're removing it from the pad so you don't tear it. I also noticed when painting on this paper that the paper itself is a little bit pulpy. Some artists are going to love that and some artists are going to hate that. So now we're doing the wet swatching. I'm just using some clean water and a Kolinsky Sable watercolor brush. I wanted to use the best I had so that we could get the best results. I also didn't want to just scrape up pigments. So while these dry, we're going to swatch the Polychromos color pencils. I really like the Polychromos pencils. They're very buttery and rich. Now, my friend Allie has my full set of Polychromos, so I'm just swatching the handful that I have, but I think it should be enough for you guys to be able to tell how well these will handle on this paper. The colors are rich, saturated, and buttery, and go down super easily on this paper. So when the watercolor's dried, I noticed that the color is still rich, saturated. Oh, sorry, wrong dry segment. Colors blend out decently well. All colors but black stand up decently well on this paper. It would be a lot of fun to attempt a full watercolor illustration using the Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils on black paper. So next, we're moving on to the Posca markers. Now, I thought the Posca markers were going to be a perfect fit with this paper, but they tear up the surface of the paper quite a bit. I am so glad I swatched these because I'm doing my brother's graduation cap and I was going to use this black watercolor paper. And since the Posca markers tear up the paper surface so much and they don't layer very well, I ended up ordering a large pad of the Strathmore black mixed media paper because Posca markers, acrylic markers work better on the smoother surface of the black mixed media paper. So they tear up the surface quite a bit. The small ones are worse than the larger ones. The brush tips probably wouldn't tear the surface at all. And the metallic Poscas are really nice in terms of how they stand up on these paper. I attempted some layering and I'm going to allow it to dry between the layers. And I found that it does not layer well at all and it sort of tears up the prior layer. And I note that for Posca, Strathmore's black mixed media paper works better. And it also takes a really long time to dry on this paper. I also tried acrylic markers, as you guys just saw. Bullet nib is just as destructive as the Posca. The chisel nib is better. The fine PN tip works well on this paper, so fine tip Posca should be okay. You guys see me swatching some of those. Now we have other types of opaque and metallic pens. Gel pens work decently well and show up really nicely on this paper. I have a bunch of different types of gel pens that I'm going to swatch for you guys. We also have some Zig Wink of Luna and Wink of Stella. We're starting with the Wink of Luna. The brush works really well on this paper, and the metallic color stands up really nicely, and the glitter type brush pins Wink of Stella also work really well. Not sure if my camera is doing it full justice. Basically, anything with a hard nib like bullet nibs will probably tear up this paper, but everything else tested so far seems to work well, particularly color pencils and gel pens. Next, we're diving in with our wet medium, or wet watercolors, wet medium, I guess. We're going to start with the Holbein. Now, not all Holbein watercolors are opaque, but they do make some really pretty pastel colors, and they seem like they'd be ideal on a black paper like this. And opaque watercolor, like some Holbein and Turner colors, seem to take to this paper really well. And this inspired me to grab some of my Chinese watercolors and swatch those later on. So this is really a very in-depth review. We're going to do a lot of different products on this paper. So these pastel watercolors, if you blend them out, they do lose their impact pretty quickly. I think this paper would be really, really nice for brush letters, Chinese watercolor artists, or Sumier watercolor artists. So next we're going in with the Mozart. We're not going to do every color. I grabbed the ones that seem pretty opaque, plus the neons and the metallics. So the neons swatch surprisingly well and are really vibrant and Tron-like on the black. Metallics, if pre-activated, also swatch well, and most of the neons dry somewhat fluoro and still visible. Next, we're doing the Prima Marketing Pastel Dreams. Now, these are all going to be pastel, semi-opaque watercolors with a lot of optical brighteners added. So I think they would work really well on this paper. The Prima Confections Pastel Dreams swatch really opaque on these while wet, and they stand out really nicely. They dry fairly pastel and still visible. So this could be a good paper for your pastel set. Now, I do want to point out my camera's having a lot of trouble focusing with this black paper, so I do apologize. I tried the best I could, but we do still have some flaws, so I wanted to acknowledge that. I am a one-woman recording team, and I do the best that I can to bring you quality reviews on a budget. So next, we're swatching some of our student watercolors that have swatched really opaque in the past, like the Lucas Studio. These swatched fairly opaque, and we'll see how it dries. And when it dried fairly opaque as well. I also swatched the Van Gogh Studio, which swatched opaque, and some colors are really beautiful on this black paper. So in general, I feel like these do dry a little bit less opaque and saturated, but there's still plenty of opacity to be worth considering for this paper. Now, this has inspired me to also try swatching gansai and Chinese style watercolors. I'm going to grab another sheet of paper once I finish with that. And that's another thing I mean with kitchen sink testing. This full review took 4 sheets of watercolor paper out of a 15 sheet pack. That's like a third of my paper used just for the purposes of review. So if you guys found this review to be helpful, useful, inspiring, if I got your brain meats going, please, please, please share this video with your friends on social media. If you can, leave a like, leave the thumbs up. If you're capable, leave a comment. YouTube and Kappa are kind of messing with my ability to receive comments, so we'll see what we maintain in the future. So we're starting with the Gansai watercolors using the Kuretake Gansai Tambi set. Now, Gansai watercolors are formulated differently from Western watercolors. They actually use an animal hide glue as their binder, and they're designed to be painted more opaquely, and they're designed to be painted more thickly. And they're also designed mainly to be used with origami. And I've done some tutorials on origami postcards here on this channel. If you guys are interested in very easy watercolor tutorials, I've got your back. So, the gansai, most colors swatch at least semi-opaque, some are fairly opaque. Darker colors tint the paper, but aren't particularly noticeable on this paper. Now, this set does have a few of the pearlescents, but later in this video, I'm also going to be swatching the Kuretake Starry Sky, Starry Colors set, in case you guys have that set and you're curious how it stands up on this paper. Next, we're going to swatch some Chinese watercolors. These are the Marie's Professional Chinese watercolors. I actually really like these, and I look forward to playing with them more in the future, so hopefully you guys will keep an eye out for that. Chinese watercolors swatch more opaque on the black paper than the Kuretake Gansai Tambi colors. They dry fairly opaque and stand up well against the dark paper. Like gansai in some ways, Chinese watercolors are designed to be handled a little bit more thickly than many Western watercolors. So I'd had high hopes that the opacity would really work in our favor because they are designed to be painted on both sides of Chinese watercolor paper. And I'm working these from the tube, just kind of picking up color using my brush inside the tube rather than swatching them out. This helps me prevent a little excess waste, and it also means less cleanup for me in the end since we're swatching so many different products today. Like I said, I really wanted to see what would work well on this paper and hopefully do a little of the field work for you guys. Save you guys some time, save you guys some money, because that's really one of my goals with this channel is I just sincerely want to help other artists. I want to help them find materials that they can afford, materials that will work well for them, materials that will help them make the art that they see in their head. Because when I was a young artist, I struggled against art supplies that really fought me, and I thought I was just a terrible artist. So I quit art for a while. And that's one of the reasons I do the reviews and the tutorials, and I try to be inspiring and encouraging, because I think art should be for everyone. Even if it's not a profession or a vocation, I hope everyone can find a way to enjoy art and appreciate art in their lives. And that is a picture from back in the past. But now we're going to swatch some American and handmade watercolors, starting with Daniel Smith. And this is the half pan palette. I have a full review and a field test of this palette here on this channel that you guys can check out. Many colors swatch really vibrantly and opaque because they're more opaque than some of the other Western watercolors. They're not as opaque as the Chinese watercolor, and they're about on par or slightly more opaque than the gansai style watercolor. For the core watercolors, we're just going to swatch a couple of colors that I think would stand up on this paper. Bright greens, bright blues, and a pyro orange. It wasn't really as impressive as I thought. It's not as vibrant on the black paper as Daniel Smith. Next, we're doing the Jasper Stardust handmade watercolors. Now, these in my field test, or I'm sorry, in my review, these were really, really opaque, very chalky. They don't really contain enough binder. So I thought maybe these would work really well on a black watercolor paper where they can really stand out. The bright colors swatch very opaque on this paper. So once I finish with the Jasper Stardust, we're going to be swatching the Molly Marbles handmade watercolors, which you see right here. And they're not as strong on this paper as the Jasper Stardust watercolors. Now, as you guys noticed, I didn't swatch every watercolor in the world, but I think I got a pretty good gamut. And hopefully this will provide you guys with the information you need to do whatever testing you might need to do. If you guys find something that works really well that I didn't cover on this tutorial, please let me know in the comments below. So now we're going to be doing metallic watercolors, starting with the Alvin Fine-Tech Pearlescence. And we're just doing the multi-color set. I thought it would give me the widest range of colors to speak from. So I pre-activate my watercolors. I don't know if I mentioned that. Let the water soak in, and then I resume the video. And that allows us to get really, really bright, saturated, vibrant mixes, ideal for paper like this. The Alvin Fine-Tech Pearlescents show up really well on black watercolor paper. That isn't surprising. I figured black paper would be awesome for metallics. Brush letterers, take note. This paper might be the one for you. You guys can see how bright and saturated those colors are. So next, we're going to do the original Fine-Tech watercolors. I have here an iridescent and gold set, as well as a couple of golds. Pre-activating those as well. Now, I did notice that these are not quite as opaque as the Alvin Fine-Tech, but some of these colors are iridescent, so they're going to be a bit transparent, and the point is really just to capture that slight shimmer. Now, I want to apologize because the metallics are completely ruining my camera's ability to focus. Next, we're going to try the old version of Twinkling H2Os. Pre-activated those as well. That's the way you get the best quality, the best effect, the best results is the word I was looking for. The best results from these. And I found that they're not particularly opaque. If you want opaque shimmer, these are not the best choice for this particular paper. So now we're moving on down to the handmade hydrocolor watercolors. I actually did a video where I compare these to the Fine-Tech watercolors if you guys want to check those out. But if you want to support handmade in the USA, hydrocolor is a great way to do that. And these are very saturated. Now, earlier when we were doing the Kuretake Gansai Tanbai, I promised that I was going to do the Starry Colors set next, and here we have them. So I pre-activated all of them, and they are about as saturated as the Fine-Tech. And my thoughts on these is that all metallics, save for the Twinkling H2Os, dry opaque and really saturated. This is a really good paper for metallics. They're really going to show up. There's a lot of contrast. It's going to be beautiful. So if you're into like hand lettering, or if you like to work with negative space, this could be a really good watercolor paper for you. I also want to point out that just from my limited use with this paper, other than it being a little bit pulpy, maybe a little softer, maybe not as much, I want to say starch, but it's not starch. Wow, words are hard. Sizing. Maybe there's not as much sizing in it, but it's a good paper in general. So we're going to try our solid gouache / tempera, the fan color set. You guys can see most of the colors swatch very opaque on this paper. Now, I am not a gouache gal. I don't know if y'all know that. This set is the closest thing I have to gouache. I really love the transparency of watercolor. So I challenge a gouache artist to get back to me with their review of this paper utilizing their gouache. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it. So I wanted to try layering, but it takes a really long time to dry on this paper. Some of it is this paper just kind of pulpy and holds on to moisture a long time, but it's also really wet the night I recorded it. So unlike cellulose paper, the cotton rag is going to hold on to the moisture longer. The fan colors are very vibrant on this paper, almost neon, and magenta dries much more opaque and visible. And spoiler alert, they actually seem to layer okay. So next I'm going to do swatches of the FW acrylic, and I'm just going to brush it on with a clean brush. The pearlescents show up really well. Opaque colors like flesh tint also show up really well, but translucent and transparent colors seem to get lost on this paper, which isn't really that surprising. So you guys might wonder why I didn't review more gouache or opaque watercolors, and it's simply because I don't like them. They're not for me. But I know that there are artists who love them. So like I said, I'd love to hear from you guys and get your feedback on those products on this paper. And the camera has trouble picking up metallics. It really didn't want to focus. So, doing a little bit of layering with the gouache. It does seem to layer well, and I might challenge myself to use the fan color for a gouache painting on this paper in the future. We'll see. Let me know if you want to see that in the comments below. All right, so most watercolors, with the exception of the gansai and Chinese, were pre-activated to give the pigments a chance to loosen up. In prior tests, these were really opaque and chalky, so they should show up on black paper. And my verdict, as I go through the different brands, I have them labeled. Hopefully you guys can see them. Tried to have it sorted out in category. I think I said 4 sheets earlier, but it looks like I managed to get it all down onto 3 sheets, so that's good, but it's still a fifth of the packaging consumed just with testing. Just with testing to help you guys figure out if you might like this paper. So show me some love, show me some appreciation. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video. Hit the thumbs up and share this video with your friends. Help them out as well, particularly the brush lettering community. It would be awesome if you guys spread the word about this. So my verdict for this paper. Metallics of almost any type are really nice on this paper. They're really vibrant and stand out. This is probably a good paper for gouache as well. The fan color stands out really nicely. If you have a set of watercolors that have too many optical brighteners or a lot of opaque watercolor like Chinese watercolor, this paper would bring a lot to the table and really make your work stand out. Neons are a lot of fun on this paper and seem to have almost a glow-in-the-dark feel. Some colors handle better than others, so you're probably going to want to swatch before you commit to a painting. The dyes in this paper, whatever was utilized to make this paper black, did not lift, did not reactivate, and did not pollute my colors, which is not something I can say for the color line paper, but that paper is designed only for dry media. So these kind of stand up to the Natto Soup reactivation test. Colors don't remove, paper doesn't remove smoothly from the pad, and it feels a bit softer than its white cotton rag Coldpress counterpart. Gel pens, some watercolor pencils, and color pencils are really nice on this paper, but bullet tip Posca pens are not a good match as they really chew up the paper's surface. Again, I'm going to recommend Strathmore's mixed media black paper for your Posca needs. With watercolors, optical brighteners are actually a bonus on the black paper, and the blackness of this paper makes it really hard to color balance and focus my camera, so I do apologize for that, but I really appreciate your patience. So I really look forward to playing around with this paper, allowing it to inspire me in the future. I actually purchased this paper myself out of pocket from the Nashville Plaza, and I purchased it just to use. I really hadn't planned on doing a review, but since I'm doing my brother's graduation cap, I wanted to do some pre-testing to kind of figure out what would work and what wouldn't work on this paper so that, you know, I don't waste a bunch of sheets or waste a bunch of time and end up with the materials destroying the paper. That's why I really encourage you guys to watch reviews and to do your own testing as well. I hope you guys found this review helpful, useful, and informative. Hopefully you got the juices in your brain going, thinking up all kinds of cool ideas and inspiration. If you end up making something with the Stonehenge black watercolor paper, I would love it if you tag me and I could see it, that would be awesome. So at Nattosoup, Nattosoup, is my handle on both Instagram and on Twitter. So I'd love to check it out. And if you regularly make art, I'd love to follow you. Hopefully we can do a follow for follow kind of thing, two artists supporting one another. So if I'm not following you and you're following me, just shoot me a message and be like, hey Nattosoup, please follow me back. I love your work, something like that. And I'll make sure to add you guys back. Videos like this are made possible thanks to the generosity of my wonderful, phenomenal, amazing, super duper patrons over on Patreon. I want to thank them so much for their support and their encouragement. Hopefully they enjoyed this video. I know several of them are watercolor artists themselves, so hopefully this piqued their interest. And if you guys like what I do, you want to help me continue to do what I do in 2020, you can join me at patreon.com/Nattosoup. This review was absolutely not sponsored by Stonehenge, nor by any of the watercolor products that I covered in this video today. I review almost everything out of pocket, and I try to disclose when things are sent to me. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, guys.